Corpses. Everywhere I turned, all I could see were their dead bodies. One after another, they had each met the same gruesome fate. Why didn't they listen to me? Why didn't they believe I knew what I was talking about? It could have saved them. I was trying to save all of our lives. This wasn't a chance meeting, these 12 strangers and I. No, we had all been invited to this place, invited here to die. It was to be a weekend we'd never forget, but now it had turned into a weekend we'd never live to remember. Here I was in the lap of luxury, a truly majestic New England estate, and I was going to have to pay for it with my life. It all seemed so perfect. A dream come true, spending the weekend in the lap of luxury. A guest at the Morte estate. It was New England's equivalent to the grandest of European castles. But now, as terror cut through me like a knife, it felt more like the Bloody Tower. I had been the last to arrive. 13 guests, almost all were relative strangers, and yet I couldn't overcome the sense that I somehow knew all of them. I felt connected to them in some way or another. It was certainly a colorful cast of characters, the sordid group of mixed nuts that any aspiring mystery writer might foam at the mouth over. Perhaps that should have been another clue that things weren't all that they seemed. There was the ornery and pompous safari captain, who foolishly thought he would lead us to safety after the bodies started piling up. The inquisitive spinster who fancied herself a cross between Angela Lansbury's Jessica Fletcher and the great Dame herself, Agatha Christie's own Miss Marple. A self-proclaimed world-class chef who seemed to me to be nothing more than some comic relief, with his over-exaggerated pseudo-French accent. The seemingly doomed young lovers, whose quote-unquote charming naivete almost made me want to kill them myself. It was the lady in red, however, that I was ready to put my bet on as the person who would make it to the end of this murderous weekend. Her name was Daphne, and while her fiery, form-fitting frock of choice was an eye-catching shade of scarlet, it paled in comparison to her flowing coif of crimson that cascaded down her bare shoulders. I had pegged her as either the calculated criminal mastermind or the bombshell beauty with brains who had lived to tell the tale. Yet she was a mystery to me, a beautiful, dangerous curves ahead type of mystery. Daphne was the one who really seemed to want to listen to my sage advice that I had methodically picked up from the series of mysterious mysteries that I loved to read. I cited these novels as my course for survival from this unseen madman that was murdering us one by one. We formed an alliance, Daphne and I, as we each felt somehow drawn to one another, feeling more connected with each other than with any of the other guests. It was a bond that would hopefully pay off in the end for one or both of us. The whole weekend had really seemed almost too cliché, and yet, at the same time, I knew it couldn't be that simple. The 13 of us had only been at the Morte estate for a few hours before the first of our numbers fell. Literally fell, in fact, down the long and winding spiral staircase. It could have been an accident, except for the meat cleaver that was sticking out of the victim's back. Falling down a flight of stairs could have been an accident, I explained to the nervous group. But with that knife in his back, this was clearly a murder. Almost as if on some morbid cue, like the plot of some overdone horror film, there was a crack of lightning and a crash of thunder, ripping through the night sky. No one wanted to believe me. Surely someone here knew the man in black, and it was an isolated incident. Really? I thought to myself dumbfoundedly. Who would even think that? Perhaps the man in black, with his devious glances and his all-too-evil, greased-wire mustache, was a victim of circumstance. More likely was the case, as I saw it, that it was our killer's way of taking out the most likely suspect. Quite the genius move on their part. Looking around at these people, I really wondered who could be foolish enough to think it was not the first of many more murders to come. It all seems so obvious now. None of us really knew each other, aside from the young couple who seemed to suffer from an insufferable case of love at first sight. Unfortunately for many of these guests, their lack of intelligence soon revealed itself. As the storm grew, so too did the body count. I tried to warn them, but no one would listen, except for the lady in red. The perfect storm had been raging for almost a day by the time the captain declared we should go on foot and try to make our escape. If hours ago, before all too convenient storm had probably washed the bridge out, I surmised, or the onset of 6 or 7 dead bodies. No, let us wait for hours and decide to try and escape during the eye of the storm. As the captain or major, whatever he claimed to be, tried to rally the few troops that were left with some convoluted story of heroics on the safari, he quickly became more of a decorated clown rather than some heroic leader. I tried to tell them that it was a bad idea to go out in the storm. Daphne even struggled to reason with their mindlessness, but it was to no avail. Which is now how I found myself sitting there drenched to the bone, back at Morte Estate. The thunder and lightning producing a devilish symphony accompanied by the pounding beats of the rain against the windows of the dark and foreboding manor house. I couldn't let them all go on their own. To try and escape when I knew it was a mistake. It took every ounce of willpower not to laugh hysterically when they actually seemed shocked that the bridge was washed out, leaving us stranded. I was also forced to watch the others as we witnessed the demise of our doomed leader, the captain, that pompous fool being finished off by a well-placed wilderness booby trap. It felt like rather poetic justice, as I was more than ready for the safari leader to bite it. Making it back to the estate, it seemed as though everyone's wheels were finally turning, even if it would be too little too late. As I sat there by the fireplace, desperately trying to get warm and dry, I gathered my thoughts, scanning around the dimly lit room. It had been a magical place at the beginning of the weekend. The spacious and lush formal lounge, with its refined furnished sofas and plush high-back armchairs, its elaborately embroidered window dressings accented with gold, fine and timeless pieces of artwork that decorated the crisp, clean walls. Now, in this diminishing lighting, after all of the death and misery I had witnessed, this room felt and looked more like a miserable, haunting prison cell. As the fire crackled and burned, the warmth of it finally starting to save me from my bone-chilling state, my eyes looked from face to face of the remaining guests. Our elderly spinster sitting upright in an overstuffed armchair, her hands folded neatly in her lap as her eyes scanned back and forth, side to side, trying to put the pieces of this puzzle together. I looked to the young lovers, huddled together on the sofa, the man holding his fragile lover in his arms as she silently wept, a mixture I was sure was of sorrow and fear. Finally, I found her standing alone across the room, almost disappearing in the dark as she stared out at the pouring rain and night sky. Daphne was the one I had bet would be here till the end, but even she seemed to be losing hope. I picked myself up from the warm encasement of the fire's protective heat and addressed the tiny group. We don't have to die. We can survive. My voice sounded chilly, almost cold, as I listened to myself deliver the news flatly. If we just remain here together, no one else will die, I explained. It really was that simple. The killer couldn't risk attacking in a group in such close quarters. It was always why, when a character in one of the mysteries I had read suggested to the group that they split up, I knew it was the end for someone. These four had witnessed the tragic advice firsthand on more than one occasion this weekend, as we lost a few of the guests to splitting up, or going off on our own. I stood there in the center of them, all pleading my case, desperate for them to finally listen to reason. Someone in this room is a murderer, but together we can put an end to this. But before I could say one more word, the fragile young lover leapt from my arms of her would-be Romeo with a frightened scream. "One of you is a killer! One of you is a killer, she frantically cried over and over. Before anyone could try and calm her, she burst from the room. Everything at that point became a blur. I yelled for her to return, but she was gone, enveloped by the thick darkness that lay right beyond the door of our sanctuary. I rushed to the door, pleading frantically with the other three not to leave the room. Nothing could happen to that girl if the rest of us remained there. It was heartbreaking for the girl's lover, but with Daphne's help, we had finally forced him to see reason. Everything was coming together. Everyone was finally listening to what I knew was right. That is where it ended, however. In one brief instant, everything fell apart. The blood-curdling scream pierced through the vast estate like a gunshot in the night. Everyone looked at me with their horror-stricken faces. I started to shake almost violently. This wasn't right. There couldn't be a killer out there, somewhere in the house, with the young woman alone. We were all here in this room together. My hands cupped to the side of my head, my brain twisting and turning in frustration and confusion as the others raced past me out into the darkness. Managing to regain enough of my composure, I was able to stop Daphne before she too vanished into the night. I grabbed the candles from the mantel and the poker from the fireplace as the two of us ventured out into the rest of the house. Daphne turned to me, the small flames from the candles illuminating her fiery hair and face. "Does this all fit into your plans?" she asked hesitantly. My plans? I was confused. Was she calling me the murderer? I have no plans, other than trying to survive. I have only been trying to help everyone with what I know from books I've read, I explained, trying to choke down my growing fears. Daphne stared into my eyes as we stood there at the foot of the spiral stairs. Before I could explain any more, everything fell into darkness. The candles went out, and there were more screams. I called out for Daphne as I heard another female screaming. It felt like someone pushed past me in the dark towards the stairs. Without thinking, I raced up the stairs, gripping the fire poker firmly in my hand. Once at the top of the stairs, that's when I heard the gunshot. A spark of light and another scream, and then a loud thud. It was pure chaos in that instant. I swung the poker viciously in front of myself in the dark. Against my better judgment, I called out, demanding to know who was there. A few moments later, there came a soft glow a few feet in front of me. It was a candle. Whoever it was there here was lighting a candle. I looked up at them, but had no idea who this masked figure was. My brain was whirling out of control. What was happening? I looked down at the figure's feet, where the crumpled body of one half of the young lovers lay. I was standing just steps away from the murderer. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice from cracking in panic. The figure just stood there silently and still. I held tighter to the fire poker as I moved forward, reaching my other hand out to them. My hand grabbed the fabric mask that hid their murderous identity. As I pulled it away, my face felt frozen with fear and confusion. I stood there, staring not into the eyes of a cold, diabolical killer. No, the eyes that were staring back at me were my own. In that instant, there came a scream from behind me on the stairs. Daphne was there, and although I couldn't see her, I knew she stood there frozen in fear, her arm outstretched, pointing to the killer who stood but inches in front of me. I knew she saw my face too. She saw that I was the killer. But how? She screamed again, but this time her scream was a name, my name. "Michael," she called out again and again. "Michael, Michael." Her voice started to twist and distort as I started to feel myself shake, and everything became darker and unfocused. Everything was blurring together, spinning out of control. "Michael," her voice called out to me. "Michael, wake up, Michael. Did you finish your homework?" But it wasn't the voice of the lady in red as I sat up from my desk, shaking off the haziness. I was in the warmth and security of my bedroom, my mother standing in my doorway repeating herself. "Did you finish your homework? It's getting late, and you have school tomorrow." I shook my head lazily, nodding in response. "I'm just about done." As I was left alone again in my room, I looked down at my desk. My copy of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None lay spread open as two bright words caught my attention on the computer screen. Written in large red font, the two words read, Murder, Massachusetts.